Hi everyone, my name is Melanie. Welcome to Furniture Recreated. This dresser came to me in very good shape, but no matter what shape your piece comes to you, before you start to work on it, it's always a good idea to clean it off. There might be some old dirt on there you didn't even know about. Now this particular piece, I needed to do some repairs on the drawers before I did anything else. And the first thing I had to do was get rid of all that old dried up glue. So I used my chisel to chisel away at that, and then I could sand away at the rest of the dried glue so that it would be ready to be glued back together and it would be nice and tight. The weird thing about drawers is if you don't get them in right, they're going to be skewed, and that means they're not really going to go back into the opening properly, and you're going to have other problems. So you really need to fix those drawers before you do anything else. The next thing up were the slides. The slides were loose. They just needed to be tightened up. There was one slide that I needed to repair, and if you want to know more about how to fix a slide on a drawer, I have a couple of videos on that. And I think I'm going to do another one based on this particular slide because it's different than the other slides I've done. I'll put a link to those videos in the description box below. Now that I'm down to the raw wood, it's time to use my 400 grit so that I can get a nice smooth finish. I wanted to take a moment to talk about the drawers in this dresser. When I'm sanding a drawer, I usually start with a 120 grit sandpaper. From there, I go to 220, and then I hand sand with a 400 grit. You can vary that a little bit. The reason I would start with 120 is because it's gritty, but it's not too rough. If it is a fairly easy surface to sand through, you really don't need anything more than a 120. A 100 is just a little grittier, and you could try that too. I used to start with 60 grit. 60 grit is so gritty. You're more likely to pick up more junk and therefore scratch back onto the surface. So I would recommend starting with 120, going to 220 or something like that, finishing up with something like 400. When you're painting, paint your surface, then you can go back with a finishing pad. Now that's more like an 800 grit to 1200 to 2500. That's a very fine grit. You can't even feel that it's gritty. It's more like leather, and what that does is it smooths out any of those paint marks, roll marks, anything like that. It just gives you the smoothest surface possible. So what that does when you are sanding your wood, when you go from your 120 to 220 and 400. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, when I sand something, I'm done when the stuff is gone. I feel like a lot of times when I'm doing a project, my goal is to get to the end, which is true. But something that I've always taught my students is that you need to enjoy the process, because the process is where you learn. The process is where you get the joy. Not that it's not joyful when it's done, believe me. But there is something to be said about enjoying it in the moment. If you want a very, very nice surface, you'll take that extra time, you'll go through those steps, and your results will be this. Ooh. It's very soft It's very nice, so whether you paint it or you stain it, your surface will be nice. Obviously, you don't have to go down to the raw wood if you're going to paint it. Sometimes I do, simply because I haven't decided whether I'm going to stain it or paint it. Let's get back to it. I'm getting ready to take the scallops off the bottom of this dresser, and the painter's tape helps me create a guide so that when I use my brand new jigsaw, I will have some idea of where I'm going. Now, I don't have to have a perfectly straight line, and I will show you why in a little while. As you can see, I'm going for a 90-degree angle here, but you can't just cut and turn the blade. You kind of have to think about how you're going to get to that corner, and what you have to do is you kind of have to make cuts on the far side going back towards it in order to get that 90-degree angle. I wanted to show you how many passes it took me to get a fairly straight line. I don't care if it's perfect, but I do care if it's visibly bad. So I wanted to make sure that it looked nice and straight, even if it wasn't perfect, because again, I will show you why it doesn't have to be perfect in a few minutes. Now, if you've seen my videos before, you know that most of my pieces I try and show some kind of wood, but this particular piece is a perfect candidate for painting, and I don't have to sand down to the raw wood. I just need to scuff it up a bit so that the paint will adhere to the wood. I also cut the scallops off the sides of the dresser so I could have straight lines there as well. The jigsaw did tear up some of the veneer on this piece, so I did have to go back and repair that with some wood filler and some glue, but it really wasn't a big deal at all because I was painting it. Now, I did decide that I wanted to show some wood somehow, and one of the best ways to do that if you don't want to stain is to use a wash, in which that is just paint and water mixed together, and really it's your own formula, whatever is right for you. This particular time I needed to add more paint because it was just soaking right into the wood and you couldn't even really see the paint. So you can do that as you go along. That's the beauty of this type of technique. I've done this technique a couple different ways, but I have found that doing this nice straight sweep across gives you the nicest, smoothest look. I have cut off the scallops on the bottom of the dresser, and now I want to add a little bit of trim to just make those lines nice and clean. I like to add a little trim. It takes away from the cut edge. It looks a little bit nicer, a little cleaner. Then I should be ready to paint. I'm working with two colors today. One is cobblestone. They're both by Fusion. Fusion also has top coat in it, so I don't have to put top coat on the paint, but I will put it on the drawers because I used a wash. It will protect the drawers a little bit more. I don't think I need to put top coat on any of the other parts. We'll see about the top. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to paint it the color Algonquin, which I've used many times. It's a very pretty color. I thought this was a nice color combo with staying with the neutrals, but having a little fun with it too. So we'll see how that goes. So I need to get to work. A quick tip when you are sanding anything, but especially when you're sanding wood filler. Wood filler has some nasty toxins in it. You do not want to breathe that, so make sure you're always wearing a respirator, and you can find the link for the respirator I'm wearing in the description box below. I am an affiliate of Amazon, so if you purchase anything from one of my links, I will get credit for that. I am applying a primer right now. It's BIN or BIN by Zinsser. Sometimes I use primer when I'm using a light color paint, and this is one of those times. I'm adding some trim here for a couple of reasons. One, it makes it look nice, and two, it's covering up all of my little jagged edges. I want the ends of this trim to be beveled, so you need to use your miter saw for that. You get the angle right by putting it on there, and see how nice that is, and using your pencil to get that angle that you want. So you notice that the saw is angled, so you have to make sure that your saw is angled in the right way in order to get the right beveled edge. I'm doing the same on the sides. I'm adding trim there as well, and it'll match the front. It's a smaller, thinner piece, but it does go with the other trim. At this point, I started to put the trim on. I actually did put this piece of trim on, but I was jumping the gun a bit because, first of all, I wanted to stain this wood, this trim. So by me applying this now, I'm making things way more difficult for myself. So I ended up taking that off. I used two different colored stains. I started with one, actually I tried a bunch of different kinds. I wanted it to go with the Algonquin, and I wanted to make sure that the color would work. I tested a few different colors, and the first color I came up with was cherry, but when I applied it to the wood it really wasn't doing much, so I added the color chestnut, which is the color that I wanted. It looks really nice, and it looked really nice with the Algonquin and the cobblestone. I had two different things I was going to put top coat on. The first was oil-based, and the reason is the stain was oil-based, so I used oil-based top coat to protect that stained wood. Now, I also used water-based top coat because the drawers have a water-based paint on them, and I wanted to put a water-based top coat over the top. Had I mixed the two, the top coat was in danger of getting cloudy, so kind of stick with the same unless you want to wait a couple of weeks before it dries. Don't forget to take good care of those drawers. I can't emphasize this enough. If you put top coat on the sides after sanding the sides of the drawers, those drawers will look so nice. They will move in and out smoothly, and they will just make your piece look so much nicer and ready to sell, and you're going to feel good about it. This trim that I put on, I put glue on first. but I wanted to make sure that it stayed in place. So I also used a little nail gun. It's a teeny tiny little thing. It's so cute and I love using it, although Teddy doesn't like it at all, as you can see there. Poor little guy. He does not like that thing. He doesn't like the compressor either, so I let him in. I also put trim on the top right there, and after I put it on, I made sure to clean up all that glue, but I'm going to have to pay attention to that in a minute. You'll see. Now it's time to put the trim on the sides. When I was using the nail gun on the sides, I realized that the sides were just veneer. There was very little thick wood. You might be able to see how thin it was right there. And one side it was okay, but the other side, the nails were going right through. So I decided to add another piece to the other side, as you see right there. I just glued that on, and I was able to get it all to stay put. I didn't want that to be exposed where someone could hurt themselves. That's just never a good thing. Now you can see the other side. There's that piece. I use these finishing pads with the paint every time, and it makes the paint so nice and smooth. So don't forget to use the finishing pads. You can find those in the description box. I have to tell on myself, I've done the same thing before. The trim is too far down and has caused the drawer to stick out. So I had to pop this off. Thankfully, it was easy to take off. And then I had to scrape it all off and paint it again. You know, it's never a fun thing when you think you're at the end and you end up having to go back and doing what I'm doing right now, scraping all the glue and the paint off. Thankfully, it was very easy to do. And once I painted over it, I actually discussed with my carpenter husband, Phil, because he's been around this stuff his whole life, and there's just little things that I just didn't know. Now, I should have done this, marked the drawer with my pencil so I'd know to make sure that trim was small enough. But what I didn't know was that you can actually cut this trim with a utility knife. This was crazy to me because I hadn't even thought of that, but this is where my carpenter husband comes in really handy, among many other things. You want to make sure that your utility knife is nice and sharp, but really all I'm doing here is scoring it, and then I'm going back and it just splits right in half. There was one little spot I had to repair, but it was no big deal at all. And once that was done, I could put it back on, and it was even simpler to work with the second time. So, wow. I mean, I thought this was going to be a huge pain in the butt, but it really wasn't. So I hope this helps you. If you're thinking about using some trim on your next piece, think about the size and maybe make sure you draw with your drawer. And then you will know that you can cut this in half with a utility knife. Yay! This is always my favorite part, putting those drawers in and seeing how everything came together. And now that the drawers go all the way in onto that trim, I'm very happy. But there's one last thing. I really wanted to put some drawer liners in here. They're scented, they smell really nice. And this is the other thing. Again, with the drawers, I can't stop talking about it because I feel like it's so important. If you ignore the drawers, if you just do the outside and not the inside, you really are doing a disservice to your client and to yourself, because it's so simple to do and it really does make you feel better. I use Mod Podge I don't use the sticky back stuff because that to me is just very stressful. And I left a little bit on the back side of this drawer. I just thought it looked a little nicer and it was easier to work with that way. So I put Mod Podge on first, and then I was able to use a plastic scraper and just get out all those bubbles, and then you have a really nice look to your whole piece. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to go out and try something new. Thanks for being here, and good luck on your next project. Don't forget to hang around for the after pictures.
You can do it.
Hey, thanks for watching my video. You can find more videos like this one on my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment and do that now. You're helping me out a whole lot, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Thanks.